Alright, welcome back to the channel, everybody. Now, last time around we were making that lower rear section. We weren't quite finished with it, but I needed to kind of stop on that so I could go ahead and get the rear fenders so we could make sure the sides lined up perfectly when we actually shape those. But I wanted to go ahead and make the pieces to cover up where the lead joints were. So I've already burned the lead out, or the majority of it. Now all we got to do is shape two pieces, one for the left, one for the right, so we can cut those sections out and weld a piece of metal in to eliminate that weld seam so we don't ever have a cracking issue later on in the future. Now, to start with, I just simply made a little paper template that goes right where the panel is supposed to be. And then we've gone through and used essentially the same method we were using on the lower rear panel, using that rubber upper wheel and the English wheel to get our shape as it rolls this direction. And then we went back with the planishing hammer to actually raise the center section here in the middle to create the roll this direction. Basically the same type of stuff we did on the rear panel, just on a much smaller scale. And we're using the planishing hammer just because it's a little faster and easier since it's such a small piece, instead of trying to work this a lot through the English wheel. So I've already got the other piece cut, so I'm going to go right over to the English wheel. I'm going to show you all how we're going to get this shape started, and then we'll move off to the planishing hammer and hammer it out until we get the shape rolled around correctly so we can start actually cutting some pieces out and getting some of this repair made. Alright, so like I mentioned before, it's just a simple paper template that I made on the car just to give me that actual curve. You know, that panel kind of sweeps around, but then it blows up kind of like a tube. So just a simple paper template. I've gone ahead and cut a piece of 18 gauge out, and you'll see I have a line going down the center. That's because we want to follow this line as we go through in the English wheel, because we want to bring this panel around this direction right through that curve. Alright, so this time around I've got a 2-inch radius lower wheel in. It's a very tight turn, so we're going to put just a little bit of pressure on this rubber English wheel. You might notice I've fixed it since last time. Got a much bigger bolt that fits the bearing correctly, so now it works a bit better. But 2-inch radius in the lower, so we're going to put a little tension on it. Like I say, we don't need a whole lot of tension, just some to give us some pressure. And we're going to follow this line as we go through the English wheel, working it in a curve. See, starting to gain some shape that direction. That's what we want. What we need. Alright, so hopefully you can tell our curvature is pretty good, the amount of actual radius we have in it, but obviously we need to make this whole thing sweep around. And so in order to do that, we're going to go in the planishing hammer. We're going to stretch this center section here because we need to make it roll around. So this should give you a much better idea. We've got, this thing is practically flat. So the metal was flat to begin with. It's still pretty much flat right there to that turn. All right, so I've got an 1 1/8" radius lower in the planishing hammer, flat upper. I wish I had like a 2, but I don't. So 1 1/8" is the best thing I've got. We're gonna work it out. Alright, so you can see we're starting to make some progress. It's no longer flat. Alright, so we're getting pretty close. What I'm actually going to do is go in and shrink this edge here on the shrinker stretcher and just kind of get it to help turn it around. It kind of needs to just twist. All right, so in all reality, I've spent 15 minutes making this piece, so it doesn't take that long to do this, but we got a pretty good fit going on. I think the area we need, especially where I've got a little dent right here where I just didn't quite finish planishing up to the edge there. We don't need all that. We're going to cut this thing, we're going to cut it right real close to that lead line, so we don't really need all that anyway. And what we do have seems to fit real nice. I'm gonna have to do a little bit on the edge here, but I think we're ready to cut everything out. So we're gonna mark it up, and I'm gonna go ahead, trim this piece here, and we'll get this little area cut out so we can finish shaping the final shape on this and get it in there. All right, so although it took me about 15 minutes to kind of rough these shapes out, it took me about 45 minutes each to get them to truly fit after cutting everything and trimming. Just a little bit of finessing on the shape. But we're ready to weld in now, so I've got some copper weld U-pole primer on the back side. We've got one hole we need to make a plug weld right here where the two panels originally came together. All right, now we got everything ground off, finished off with 120 grit, smoothed out. Looks real nice. All right, so let's go ahead and cut the lower panel out. We'll see what we're gonna have to work on next time around. All right, so at this point, I've got everything cut out that I can cut out for now. What we need to do before we go any further is I want to finish shaping this piece along the bottom edge. So what I did was I went ahead and made me a template to go on the side, just so I had that general shape, especially down here at the bottom. What I'm going to do is clamp this piece back in. We're going to mark a line right down here where the piece needs to break over. And we're going to run it through the English wheel and make a pass to give that real tight radius. And then we're going to move over to the tipping wheel and we'll tip that edge up to really bring it around to a little bit of past 90, the way this bottom section is here. Alright, so the tricky part is I need to put the line for the English wheel, which is going to be at the top side of this piece of tape, needs to be on this side. And the other line here will work fine for our tipping edge, but we're going to have to figure out how to get this line to the other side. Alright, so a bunch of little dash marks. We'll run us a piece of tape on the outside so we can make us a line. Alright, so again, not a whole lot of pressure. Right down the middle. So I am going to add a little bit more pressure. I don't think it's giving me quite what I need. Let's see if this works. This might be all I can get since it's just a 2-inch wheel. Need something a little tighter, I believe. Not too bad. We're looking for that shape roughly right there, because we're probably doing this a little further down when we need to, because we can cut some excess off the top, but we are hell damn right on the money. Actually, if we look at this, our tipping line is probably a little too far down. I'd say the tipping line is right where it needs to be. So let's tip this thing up. Alright, so you can see we're looking pretty good where I've got the end at. And the problem we have now is you can see how wavy this piece is on the bottom all along here. We need to trim some of this off and get it away because we don't need all that depth. We need to take about a ½ inch or so off so that we can shrink this edge. It's got too much material, that's why it's wavy. But you can see, hopefully you can see, right there where our line is, around here. So we just need to come on around more, and then what we can do is slide the panel up or down if we need to. We still have plenty of room, plenty to trim off here if we need to bring this panel up to get it a little better in there. Alright, so I've got everything trimmed off. All we're going to do is go through the shrinker and just kind of tighten up the edge, just kind of make it not wavy. And then we'll test fit it a couple times, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have to pull it in a little bit more than it is. Alright, so we mainly need to tighten it up more towards this end where it wraps around. So that was 6 or 8 inches from the end. Pull it around some. This edge here needs to roll under more so we can kind of lower the panel and drop it down, get it to kind of swoop under like that. Alright, we're looking pretty good, so I'm going to mark the sides and we'll trim off what we don't need on the sides so we can go ahead and tip those edges over and really get this thing very close to what it needs to be. There's something I wasn't sure of, but definitely positive of now. I was trying to roll this edge over, but it's going to have to roll so tight that I'm not going to be able to shrink all this material in to get the turn like it should be. So what I'm going to have to do is take that little cardboard template I made of this edge, and I'll just cut 2 pieces out, one for each side, and trim off where I already have it marked. Just cut this off. And that way I don't lose a lot of the shape, and we can make the side exactly to shape. And we'll just have to weld it. We'll just have to weld it right there along the edge. So I don't want to weld on the edge, but that's fine. That's what we're going to have to do because I'm not going to be able to shrink this around in such a tight manner. Live and learn. All right, so we've gotten a lot closer on that lower panel. We've got a few things knocked out. I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. We've got a lot of stuff going on, especially where we've got a repair underneath there. So I'm gonna stop working on that outer panel at the moment so we can get everything underneath taken care of. But obviously we've got a lot done. We've got a little bit going on here. Like I've got some notes there. We need to planish this weld now that we have access under there. But as far as the fitment of this panel, we're looking really good. We're pretty good down here too. We're gonna have to do a lot of cleanup under here as well. So we need to get some rust off of some things, clean everything up, get that sprayed with some stuff. Might have to do a little bit of extra work right on the end of this panel here. It doesn't quite want to lay down like it should. But like I said, I'm gonna end it here. Got quite a bit done. So next time around, we'll get to actually repairing some things, and hopefully we can finish that panel in the next video and get it attached. We'll get those rear fenders on, make sure everything fits correctly. So as usual, hopefully you learned a little something. If you did, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and tap that bell. I'll catch you on the next one.